What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Sports Report. I'm your host, Emily Peters, and welcome in here. I am so excited to welcome you guys in here for the very first time. This is my first ever podcast, so it's going to be a little bit of a learning process, but it's something I wanted to do for a very long time, so I am very excited. A little bit about me before I get into what this podcast is going to be about. I'm originally from Orlando, but I moved up here to Tallahassee about 6-7 years ago to go to Florida State, so go Noles. I was a communications major, and I worked with Seminole Productions during my time at Florida State. I still work with them freelance, actually, but I started off doing some graphics, some behind-the-scenes things, but it has always been my dream to be an on-camera talent. So I bugged my boss for a very long time, for months, shout out Kirby Candor, and, finally he was like, okay, let's get you as an in-game host. So I started in-game hosting. My first sport was actually volleyball. I guess I should have explained more what Seminole Productions is. They are responsible for all of the live broadcasts at Florida State. So, most of the time that's sports, but they're also out there at homecoming, graduation, those kind of things. So oftentimes if you see people out there with cameras, it's probably Seminole Productions. They do incredible work. I could do an entire podcast about them, and I hope to have some of them on here at some point. But I started working with them my sophomore spring, and I eventually worked up to being an in-game host. The last couple years I did in-game hosting at Doak Campbell Stadium for Florida State's home games. So some of you may recognize me. I was the one out there like, what's up, Seminole fans? My good friend Tucker Pierce does it now, and he does a phenomenal job. He was literally made for this job, so shout out to him too. But eventually I got the opportunity to do some sideline reporting with soccer. That was the first sport I had the opportunity to do it for, and I've done women's basketball, softball, baseball, just to name a few, and that eventually led me to where I am now. Last fall, I had the opportunity to do some sideline reporting for the high school football games on the CW. The broadcast is called Friday Night Rivals, and it's done by the local station here. I'm sitting here right now. It's the Fox 49, NBC 40, and CW station. Another good friend of mine, I'm giving out all of these shout outs right now, but Arya Masudi, he let me know that the station was looking for a reporter. And of course I was like, yes, that's my dream. That's what I want. So I was like, yes, please give them my name, all of that. And so they called me, we sat down, and it worked out. So last fall I did those games as the sideline reporter, and I loved it. I had so much fun. I loved working with them, and luckily for me, the feeling was mutual. So they said, hey, come on and work with us full time. So I'm now a producer and host and reporter right here at the station. And that brings me to this podcast. So initially, when I pitched this idea to have a podcast here, the idea was to follow along the Friday Night Rivals and we have 10 weeks of football games, and just kind of go as we go and interview the coaches each week, and, just give you an inside look, I should say, at these football programs, because, it all starts in high school for these players, and it's a special time. I used to love being a part of the Friday Night Lights in high school. I was on the dance team, and, we were right on the track, right on the sideline, next to the cheerleaders, and I loved being just right there. It was so much fun, and I know that these high school games mean so much to everyone involved, the community. It's not just about those two teams that are on the field. So I was excited, to get this podcast, just to follow the FNR season, but it didn't exactly work that way. I think I didn't realize how hard it was to get a podcast kind of off the ground. And I also didn't anticipate that we would be on YouTube right away. So a lot of the interviews that I did are over the phone. So, I'm kind of working with creating some graphics and putting those on-screen elements on there for you. So, eventually I want to get some guests in here to talk with me in person so that it's all on camera. But for right now, I have done the interviews with the coaches. We are on week 10 of Friday Night Rivals. So we have our last game on Friday. And the schedule got a little bit flipped around due to Hurricane Idalia. Our second game was Godby versus Madison County. And of course, Madison County got hit pretty hard with the hurricane. So prayers, thoughts, whatever it is that you do, definitely still send those Madison County's way. They are still, dealing with the repercussions of that. So, we keep them in our thoughts. But we added a 10th game, and this Friday we will have Lincoln at Florida High, and that is going to be a very good game. If you've been following high school football, these two teams are pretty well matched. So it'll be a fun one. I look forward to filling you guys in on it after it happens. But right now, I'm going to play for you an interview that I did with our play-by-play and color analyst, Ben Sinco and Eric Luallen. And we did this preseason, so we talked about, the games that have already happened. But it's fun to look back on and reflect, see where maybe we went wrong, but also maybe see where we predicted correctly. So it'll be fun. So I'm gonna play for you that interview now. The first half, anyway, we went pretty long, so I'm gonna cut this into two halves. But I have been sitting on all of these interviews for so long, so I am just so excited to finally put them out there. Excited for you to get to listen to them, and learning. But I'm super excited. So without any further ado, let's get to this first interview with play-by-play Ben Sinco and color analyst Eric Luallen. I am now joined with Ben and Eric. Guys, it's so good to see you. How are we doing today?
Fantastic.
Doing
Glad
great.
to be here.
Doing great.
So I think to start off, it would be best to maybe get an idea of who you guys are. And we'll start with you, Ben, since you're normally the one here steering the boat.
All right. I'm Ben Sinco. I'm a Scorpio. And let's see. I'm the play-by-play voice of Friday Night Rivals, Tallahassee CW. Big-time football fan pretty much my whole life. I don't have any kind of schooling to do what I do. I just watched a lot of football growing up and just kind of did my best Pat Summerall when I jumped in the booth. And I think it's working pretty well. Although I like to do a little mix of Joe Buck, too. I like to lean towards some of the lighter side of things, too. But, started out doing high school football when I worked with Comcast. Just 1 year, they did broadcast local high school football, and I just walked by before they started the season and said, hey, can I help in any way? I'm just a big football fan. And they said, can you run a camera? And I said, never done it, but I'd like to give it a shot. They said, okay, we'll come out to Cox Stadium. That's where all our games are. Just come out on Friday night. And so I showed up. They kind of gave me a brief tutorial, and I ran camera for a year, enjoyed it. The next year, rolled around, and I knew they weren't very happy with the people that were doing the games on TV. At that point, we were TV and radio. We did a simulcast. And I said, hey, I'd love to give it a shot doing the games, calling the games. And they said, okay, you can do color. Apparently color is like the easiest thing to do. I mean, anybody can do color, right? Right, Eric?
Yeah. How do you feel about that comment?
Obviously, I'm a living, breathing example there.
So I did that for, I think, 3 years. And then they shut down their local production team and didn't think I was ever going to be able to do this again until I get the phone call 4 years ago, was it? 4 years
2020.
ago? 2020. Coming off COVID, and they said they were going to do this and asked if I wanted to do it. And I said, yes, please. So the rest is history. That's where we're at. Yes, from there to here, I'm very excited about doing this. I love doing it, and I do it for free.
Don't say that out loud. Your contract might change.
All right, I enjoy doing it, and it's been such a great time getting to know players and the people behind the scenes, and just love doing it.
We'll go to your partner now, Eric. Let's hear a little bit about you.
Well, I played offensive line at Florida State, 1986 to 89. I just finished, this past spring was my 17th year doing play-by-play for FSU baseball on the radio, which doesn't seem like a normal path to go from playing offensive line to doing baseball on the radio. But I also played baseball in high school. I, too, have no formal training in this radio thing that I've now had, that I've now jumped into and been doing in some form or fashion since 1997, I believe. So what is this, 2023? Yeah, it's been a little bit of a ride. I got a sales job at a radio station, and it was a sports talk station, and I would go sit in with the guy who did afternoons and just talk football because I played at FSU, and that ended up kind of parlaying into fill-in jobs from time to time for him when he would be traveling. Then eventually full-time, and I was doing afternoons on sports talk station and did that for almost 5 years. That led to the other things in baseball, and I've filled in some on basketball for Florida State, and then got the call on this. And, it was coming off of 2020, the baseball season. We had 17 games that year, and at that point, as a lot of us we're kind of spending a lot of time at home, and got a call from somebody I used to work with that said, "Hey, would you like to do this?" And I said, "Well, absolutely. I'd love to. Get me out of the house. Get me doing something." And so now 4th season of being the color analyst for Friday Night Rivals.
The easiest job on the planet.
Right. It's the easiest job on the planet.
Lucky you.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it. We all know that the preseason, when we talk about high school football, there's a lot of moving parts. I guess let's start with the coaching, because that's kind of where the tree starts, with high school football. I think the biggest one is Chiles. Ben, do you want to take it away with this?
Bill Reagans, who was the defensive coordinator there for 6 years, is now I guess they're calling him the interim head coach while they're doing their due diligence.
They're going to see how the season goes and then reevaluate at the end of the season.
Yeah, so he steps in. He's done a great job with that defense the last few years. And Coach Pettis was asked not to return. There were some things that went on, and his son Trey is left to be the offensive line coach at Wakulla, and he's moved on to another school within the Leon County school system, not coaching football, but So new look at Chiles. Chiles is a team that last year 4 of their 5 losses were by 6 points or less. So, and that defense had a lot to do with it. Of course, the offense, Trey Jones, can't gloss over the fact that he was the offensive player of the year last year. Running back, a very good player, but that defense did a really, really good job last year.
Well, and I think they'll play with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, too. They felt like they should have been in the playoffs. They weren't included in that, and a lot of people thought that they kind of got jobbed a little bit there. But Bill Reagans, I've known Bill since 1986. He and I were in the same recruiting class coming into Florida State. Just as hard-nosed of a player as you'll ever find on the gridiron. Played professionally. He's got a coaching background that goes, he was at Florida State for a while. He was at Valdosta State for a while. He's been at various high schools. He's got head coaching experience. He was head coach at Leon back in the aughts. So I think it's a great opportunity for Bill. He's a guy that the players love him. The parents love him. To me, there are no downsides to Bill. I think he's an excellent football guy. I love that he gets this opportunity now, even if it's just on an interim basis, and I think people will be happy with what they see him do with this opportunity.
I got to know Coach Reagans during his time with Leon back when I was doing the games with Comcast, and that's the most success that program has had in quite a while.
Yeah,
like 26 and 26. Some of these other programs might not be happy with that after a few years, but Leon, I think they would love to have that still, within the last few years, just not very good. So
well, we got to call games with Bill's son when he was a player at Chiles. He was a wide receiver and defensive back for Chiles, a really good player, Trip Reagans. So that was fun to watch, and I know Bill enjoyed having a hand in coaching Trip when he was a player. But Trip was a guy that when we watched him play for Chiles, he kind of, there was things about him that to me was really big chip off the block as far as the way he played and the way he presented himself on the field, and that was fun to do. But I will try not to jinx him like I did last year. We had that Chiles game towards the end of the season last year, and they had the shutout going, and I said, maybe Coach Reagans is the defensive coordinator. can get the shutout. And I barely got shutout out of my mouth. And all of a sudden, their opponent, I don't even remember who they were playing in that game, they hit a deep ball and end up scoring a touchdown to break the shutout. And Bill sends me a text like a week later because he's watching it on TV. And he's like, Lou, what are you doing to me, man? So, no, it'll be fun, and I'll try not to jinx Bill Reagans this season.
Well, let's hope not. I know you mentioned that you've known him for a long time, and, you know, he had a certain playing style. Do you think that that's going to translate into his coaching style?
I don't see how it can't. I mean, that's, you know, that's something that you see happen so often in coaching, that teams do take on somewhat of that personality of their coach and how they presented themselves when they played the game. And I do think you'll see some of that. And you saw some of that with their defense the last 6 years that he's been there at Childs, where they were a scrappy bunch and would kind of get after you a little bit. So I think you'll see that be the personality of that team. I think one of the interesting things to watch for is what will they do, what will they be offensively? Because you've got Bill Reagans, the defensive guy. He's been the defensive coordinator. They ran that wing T, which was such a unique offense. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what they decide to do offensively as far as when we see them out there, because I don't know what their plan is going to be on that. I don't know what what kind of philosophy they'll have as far as that goes. Will it be something that is a philosophy of Bill, even though he's the defensive coach, or will he bring in an offensive guy and just say, you do your thing, or will he hire a guy that has a similar philosophy? You know, that's one of the things I don't know as far as how he's going to handle that piece of it. But I think that's going to be something interesting to watch with Childs this year.
Do you think it's too late in the offseason to be able to implement a change like that on offense? Because, you know, the investigation kind of dragged on over the summer, and if they would have even made changes, you know, with him not knowing whether he was going to be back or not as the head coach.
Well, the other side of that, though, is, so I understand what you're saying. The other side of that is, can you get somebody in who can teach that offense? Because you do, you know, it's not a typical offense. It's not one that you see. It's not very common. Mm-hmm. So finding somebody else who can come in and not skip a beat with that same offense and that philosophy and the play calling and all of those things, I think that's also a tough part too. And I think that may be even tougher to expect a seamless transition to somebody else in such a unique offense. So I don't know that it would have been any easier to keep that offense in play. It just depends on who you can find, and that's one thing I don't know what they've decided to do over there.
All right, so we do have them, and they host Wakulla for the first game. What have you guys seen in the offseason for the War Eagles?
Well, Wakulla last year they were 7-1, and trucking along. Then Hayden Cleese, their quarterback, got hurt. They lost him for the rest of the season. They wound up losing their final 3 games, including their playoff game, and so he's back. He's healthy. Got a great supporting cast. They lose their top running back, but the receivers are back. Cameron Brinson, Jeremiah Thomas are both returning, and they add a transfer named Nehemiah Chandler from Monroe. Chandler actually just committed to Georgia Tech as a defensive back, but he's 6'1" receiver, big playmaker, does a great job on the defensive side of the ball too. We saw him when we had a Monroe game last year. He actually played some quarterback in that game. Was mostly running the ball. Just showed us what kind of an athlete he is. So I anticipate he's going to do a great job with Wakulla making some plays. I don't know if he'll be the star. Salmon Brinson was that guy last year. 13 touchdown catches, 700 yards, kickoff return, touchdown, and he played a great job on defensive back too. I still think Cameron will be the main target for Hayden Cleese, but I just expect Nehemiah Chandler to do a heck of a job for them too. So I'm expecting big things from this Wakulla team.
And I think too, one of the things that you look at with Wakulla that's kind of a unique home atmosphere that they get at that stadium. It's always loud. You get crowds. I remember you talked to the one fan who's been there for since
like
the 1970s or whatever it is. So they really do. And granted, that first game of the year when we see him against Childs, that's going to be at Childs, but we do see him later in the season on October 13th against Taylor County at Wakulla, and that's such a great home field advantage for Wakulla. So anytime you talk about that team, I think that's something that you really have to take into account is exactly what they can get done at home with all the support they have out there.
And you feel safe when you're there too.
Yes, very, very.
I feel like we need to kind of build on that a little bit because even I'm sitting here like,
No, not really.
They're security people. You can't miss them.
Yeah.
You know, they have a presence, and I noticed it when we first got there. And a couple hours before the game started, they had a presence, and I went up and talked to the principal about it. And she said, and I forget the term they use for him, but
I think it's Guardians Program.
Guardians Program.
Yeah.
That's what it is. Thank you, Eric. And she mentioned the Guardians Program, and that it's during the school day and athletic activities. There's a presence there. You know, they just want people to know their school is secure. And when you see these guys, you know that they mean business, so you don't want to mess around.
Right. No, well, I mean, that's good, you know.
Yeah, for sure. But Scott Cleese has been the head coach of that program for about 20 years, maybe a little bit less, because when I was at Comcast, when I was doing games, J.D. Jones was there the last couple years, and then Coach Cleese took over. So that's something that something to say about that program is the consistency. He's been there for a long time. You know what to expect from that program, and since he stepped in to be the head coach, it's been a solid program ever since. And it's fun to do the games from the kids table, right?
Lots to look forward to in Wakulla County.
Not to mention Emily's
sure.
in-crowd interviews.
Oh,
right? Yeah.
I'll have to do another one. It sounds like it was a crowd favorite.
Are we going to get Emily in a pyramid this year?
I think we'll do a pyramid.
Okay.
I had a hard hat on at one point.
That's right.
I think
That's
that was at
right.
Florida
I forgot
High.
about the hard hat.
Yep, and it's a good thing I had that hat on because I got a T-shirt thrown at my head about 30 seconds before we were live. I think I was actually standing there for a little bit while we were live until I realized
you
that
noticed
we were.
nobody asked me to get on top of the pyramid.
Yeah, I think you're more of a solid foundation.
Okay.
You're a base.
Yeah, all right. There we go.
Maybe, you know what would be good? We could have a talent pyramid.
You and I on the bottom.
Do you really want to see my knees and my back? Try to do any of that stuff?
All right, we'll kind of cross that bridge maybe another time.
Well,
but
I thought you were going to say we're going to cross out that idea. But
Speaking of T-shirts, I guess we'll be getting new ones this year. I mean, we've got a new
sponsor,
new presenting. Is it a presenting sponsor?
just don't fire any of the T-shirts at Emily's head.
please, unless I have a hard hat on.
Right. Well, yeah. There you go.
Courtesy of the Florida High student section.
Yeah.
Thank you. Shout out, you guys.
So I've been working on, I'm so used to doing the T-Spark Enterprises Friday Night Rivals presented by Walk On Sports Bistreaux. We said the same thing over the last couple of years, and now it's Barineau that's going to be taking over as the main sponsor. So I need to have to try to work on how I'm going to.
You're going to have to completely shift because halftime is going to be different too. Because Barineau was halftime.
Yeah, Barineau's been with us since the beginning. We appreciate all they've done, and now they've stepped up to be even bigger part of the program.
Yep.
So.
Now, Ben, you mentioned having to kind of change up your lingo a little bit, get used to saying things a little bit differently, and I want to make a promise to both of you guys this year. I am going to work
You're gonna make a promise?
I'm going to make a promise to work on something.
Okay.
So if I slip up, it's just know there's an effort behind it. But for those of you who don't know, I'm, the sideline reporter. And when I'm finished saying what I'd like to say, I have to toss it back up to the booth.
Right.
And generally the sideline reporter will toss it back to the play-by-play, but last year I had a habit of tossing it back to Eric. So, Ben, I guess it's more of a promise to you. I will make an effort to toss it back to you as I am supposed to.
See, what Ben doesn't know is Emily was getting $5 a mention every time she tossed it back to me. So
You weren't supposed to say that on air.
All right.
Okay, guys, let's go ahead and move it along a little bit. Week 2, we've got Madison County at Godby. Actually, at Godby. We're not going to Gene Cox this year.
Mm-hmm.
Let's start with Madison County because they do have a soft spot in my heart because I went to their practice last year. And I love what they're doing. I love what Bryce Harris is doing as a new coach. This is a tough program to take over because they are historically very good. They have a lot of championships as of late under their belt. So I'm very excited for this team to see what they do in year 2 with Coach Harris.
Well, that's another one. You talk about historically they've been a running team, and I mentioned earlier, we were kind of used to seeing those offensive lines for Childs. Madison County is another one that you're just used to seeing these big bruising linemen. And it's certainly it's going to be an adjustment for them if they're going to kind of change how they do things, because there's a vast difference between what you're trying to do run blocking and what you're trying to do pass blocking. And to go, it's a big adjustment when you try to do that, to just completely flip that. Personally, as an offensive lineman, I kind of liked the pass blocking better. The run blocking, you can insert jokes about offensive linemen here, but the run blocking, you end up having to run downfield a lot more, which most offensive linemen don't necessarily like that. As far as what kind of preference the guys have, that's not that matters, but there is an adjustment there. So it will be interesting to see how they're able to incorporate that and take that, what's traditionally been a strength of theirs, and kind of flip it a little bit.
They've been quite a consistently good program over the number of years. Last year, it took it on the chin, 4-7, new head coach. Looking for Jason McDaniel to be a stud running back for him this year. You mentioned before, most of the time this team, when they have successes, they're able to run the ball very well. So it'll be interesting to see, can they shake off last year, chalk it up as just a down year, and get the Cowboys program, back to being the dominant team. Boot Hill, where they play, it's always such an intimidating place for teams to go in and play when the team is clicking. So hopefully they'll be able to get that shine back on them and perform as well as they have been this season.
I definitely agree with that, just where they are. And something that I really loved about this team is the entire county, Madison County, they love this football team. They really do. Like, the kids grow up and they want to play for this football team, and there's a lot of passion. And I mean, it's a football county, it really is. So I'm looking forward to see what they do. It'll be kind of fun to see how they've grown, and if they can shake off a bit of a rebuild. Godby, on the other hand, we know they've had their struggles. What do you guys think we'll see from them?
They seem like they've just been in a state of flux here for a few years now, and this is a program that it's not that long ago it was a state power, and it was a state power under multiple head coaches. They're going to have, I think one of the biggest losses for a team in the county becomes a very big gain for another team in the county. That's Christian Sims, their quarterback, who, we saw him last year and there were struggles there, but as a ninth grader, you could really see things with him that made you go, this kid could end up being special. So I think that's going to be a huge area that they've got to replace on that team. When you had a kid that you just say, the progression from 9th to 10th grade with what he's able to show, that's a lot to try to replace. They had some staff. Shannon Baker, who was one of my teammates at Florida State, left Godby. He's now at Leon. He's the new offensive coordinator over there. So it just seems like they've kind of been in this state of flux. But I know one of the things they're trying to do is return to the tradition of that program, and that's been a focal point over there with the new regime and all that. So I don't know what the expectations are going to be there, but certainly that's something that they're going to have to work hard to try to get back to.
Yeah, DeMario Jones is the second year with the program. When spring was going on and the practice was going on, the jamboree and things like that, things were looking up. You mentioned before Christian Sims. There was a receiver that kind of came out of nowhere in the spring. Tylen Vickers is his name, sophomore, and he made some big plays. Continuing into the 7-on-7 team as it went through the spring and the summer, he was doing great. So people were thinking, hey, you know what? There's that connection. Sims and Vickers,
and that's coming off a team that the improvement they made last year from the beginning of the season to the end of the season. So they were on a high note going into spring too.
And then all of a sudden, Christian Sims leaves and goes to Lincoln. It was a shock. To me, it was a shock. I don't know, how things were going out there on, off of Tharp Street, and one day he's doing a great job in the spring on the 7-on-7 team, and the next day there's a video that gets released on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, where it was a heck of a production, where it shows him, and all of a sudden he's walking on the field in Lincoln, and
dramatic
fireworks go off and things
Very
like that.
cinematic.
So yeah, it was just it really surprised me, because I was expecting Godby to be a much improved team. Now it's just a bunch of question marks. I don't know what to expect. Vickers apparently has some undeniable talent. He's opened the eyes. He's being recruited by a lot of schools now. Had a visit to Florida State over the summer, but I don't know. I don't know what. It's a big deal though that they do have. They were the last county school to get a home field. With the turf, and so So that's huge for them. They can now host games out there on a beautiful beautiful field. We'll be out there for one of the games, so it'll be nice change of pace for them to be able to host games out there on a pristine field.
All right, so that first game between Wakulla and Childs, Wakulla took it. It was 21-17 was the final score. And then, of course, that second game between Madison County and Godby was canceled. So prayers and thoughts and everything else still, point them in Madison County's direction. And so I mentioned in the open as well that this podcast was going to follow along the FNR season. And since we're playing catch up, I'm still, going to be posting those interviews kind of after the season, because I loved my conversations with the coaches, and they are really putting together special programs at these high schools in the area. But I also wanted to open it up to Tallahassee sports sort of in general and bring on, Florida State, FAMU, TCC, just some really cool individuals from, the different athletic programs at the different universities here and colleges, and, maybe clubs here in Tallahassee, just any local athletics that want to be a part of this or have some cool stories that we can, give you the inside scoop on. So a lot to look forward to with that. Next time, I'm going to play you the second half of my interview with Ben and Eric. We will cover the other 8 games that we had this season. And unfortunately, we didn't talk about the Lincoln and Florida High matchup because that wasn't on the schedule yet. But I'll have a fun little recap for you for that game eventually. So that's what we have to look forward to. But I'm super excited to finally have this first episode out. And I am so thankful to all of you that have tuned in. So stay tuned for more. And signing off for the first time, I'm Emily Peters, and this was the Sports Report.